Welcome to the discussion. My guest today is Colonel Jennifer Krolikowski, the Senior Material Leader for Space Command and Control at the Space Systems Command. Colonel Krolikowski, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation today. Looking forward to our chat.
We're going to have a fun conversation today on acquisition. Now, before the audience sighs and says, "Uh-oh, acquisition," this is going to be a great conversation because I think there's so many interesting things that are going on across the Space Force. And in many ways, the Space Force is starting, scratch is maybe not the best word for it, but you all are starting at an area that a lot of agencies didn't get to. So let's just start right there. What is your acquisition strategy for the Space Force?
Oh gosh, so I'm actually going to speak to my particular program itself. So Space Command and Control. Our nickname is Kobayashi Maru. If some people are following us in that fashion, but a lot of the stuff that we are doing and kind of pathfinding, we're using that as information to be able to potentially extend to the broader Space Force in ways that we acquire. In that fashion. So for me specifically, I work in the field of software. So trying to provide different software capabilities to our combatant, to the JTF-SD, so the U.S. Space Command, and as well as the CIFSIC from that kind of branch of things too, again, rolling up into Space Command. So primarily, my operators are the National Space Defense Center that's in Colorado Springs, and the Combined Space Operations Center that's at Vandenberg, also here in California. But a lot of the things that we're doing is we're trying to shift the mindset of how we actually go about and acquire. And so if you're tracking, there's typically three things that you do from the whole acquisition process: requirements, the actual acquisition itself, and then the financial aspects that are associated with that. So from a requirements perspective, one of the first things I started when we kind of kicked off this venture with Kobayashi Maru was to bring in those users and operators in like right from the start and have that dialogue and that continuous communication with them. One, to not only make sure I understand where their pain points are and what is it that they are looking to better their mission or to better performance for their mission, but also to give them back some expectation management of what we can do on the acquisition side from either a tech perspective or a timeline for what it would take to get to alleviating some of those pain points. But having that continuous dialogue back and forth over the last couple of years has been extraordinarily helpful for us, especially in the realm of user adoption. There's a lot of times in acquisition is that when we receive one of the JSIDS documents and we're trying to interpret it and understand, because it was just kind of thrown over the fence to us, and we're trying to understand what that requirement set looks like without necessarily having that user interaction, we end up maybe building something that nobody ultimately wants, right? And so, or much less uses after that build has been done. So we look to making sure we have that dialogue and that communication back and forth with our users, so that they actually want to use it when we deliver it. And so far in the 11 applications that we have built to date over the last couple of years, we have them all in operational acceptance and are being used on the floor specifically. So very excited with that. Now we have over 2,600 users from all of the applications that we have, and versus when we had JMS, the Joint Mission System, which was my predecessor program for there. I think we had maybe 50 people using that particular set of software that was delivered. So that user adoption rate and that operational acceptance is very, very important to us. And so that's how we work on the requirement side to do that evolution and actually propel the Space Force to getting after what is actually really needed so that we can enhance that mission set. The second piece in there is, from the acquisition standpoint. So we are actually one of the Pathfinder programs for the DoD for the software, what they call the software pathway. And so that was the 5000.87 is what specifically refers to for the policy there that was signed out May earlier this year. But we actually helped with that building of that policy. Our program started in the late 2018 piece is when we moved over into doing more agile sorts of concepts for acquisition and how we actually build software. So we've been in this feedback loop with the policymakers of here's what I'm experiencing in the field, and here's where my pain is, if you will, from an acquisition perspective, whether that is like within contracting or with just reporting and execution and what a milestone looks like and all of those. And that feeds back into the software pathway information. So that's actually helped us propel a lot. So like I said, those 11 applications, we did in, under 2.5, 3 years to have all of those delivered. And a lot of that contributed because of the way that we changed acquisition versus historically where we had JMS that was working for about 5, 8 years, only was able to deliver one item and then nobody really used it. So a lot of that acquisition mindset change has been helpful in us, producing capability and actually getting that out to our customers in our field.
Let me jump in real quick because I want to go, because I think before we get into the third leg of the stool here, the user piece, we hear that a lot, the key piece to bring in the users to understand, okay, this is what they want. I mean, this is really what we're talking about here, really is DevSecOps, agile acquisition. That's really the innovation, if you will, and innovation is maybe not the best word that you all have brought into it, is not just throw it over the transom and hope it gets done, but hey, here's piece one. You like it? No? Okay, I'll change it. Here's piece one now. Okay, you like it? Okay, now I'll go to piece two. It's it's a change in mindset.
No, absolutely. And I also, so that's actually one thing I probably should go back into is our culture and how we actually live and think within Kobayashi Maru. So if people understand the reference of Kobayashi Maru, I'll harken back to that. So it is a Star Trek reference. And it was an exercise that all cadets had to go through in order to see how they would handle a no-win situation. And not that I'm in a no-win situation, but one of the things, Captain or James T. Kirk, the cadet at the time, he actually changed the conditions of the scenario. He looked at the problem differently in order to be able to win and beat that particular exercise. So here at KM, we actually look at the problem differently. How do we actually embrace that in order to get to wins or yes or what have you, so that we can produce that? So one of those cultural aspects is what we call user-centered everything. So yes, it is about that interaction with our user community, the guys who are actually operating that software. But I also, my leadership is one of my users, and the stakeholders I have there, from the vision that General Raymond has for the Space Force and what he needs for operational space command and control, and what the combatant commander needs, from his perspective. So I take those visions and I balance that with what the operator pain points are, so that as I build my software, I can build in such a way that it stays flexible, that it can scale and be extensible, and that I can actually start to balance both sides from a top down and a bottom up approach to be able to actually extend that software to address whatever changing priorities there are or changing threats there may be. But I bring all of the users that I have in there so that my software is actually built appropriately.
I'm glad you brought up the Kobayashi Maru and the background of that, because everyone thinks it's Star Wars, right? They hear Kessel Run, they're always thinking Star Wars, and there's always that battle, Star Trek versus Star Wars.
We represent the West Coast.
Very cool, very cool. The third piece to the stool I want to have you go down as well is around the acquisition process, when it brings up the requirements, the acquisition, the financial aspects. That's the other really challenging when it comes to ensuring that you're meeting the user's need is, well, the users want every bell and whistle. They want the most shiniest object of all shiny objects because they heard somewhere something that well, if you do the AI this way, it solves all my problems. I never have to come to work again or something. So walk us through that acquisition process piece.
Yeah, no, so for sure. So I understand, and that's part of like, I welcome those questions from the user community, or like if they're seeing something, the latest, greatest tech, that actually helps me go and explore those things. But then I also bring back to them, the expectation management or the reality of, if the tech's not ready yet, or how would we ingest it, or those sorts of things. But when you go back into the financial piece, as everybody is aware, Congress appropriates in different, provides funding in different appropriations. So we have our DT&E, we have operations and maintenance, and we have procurement funding. And what we were seeing in software is that, there's not a real big difference between the guy who may be writing code for a new feature is the same, and he's the same guy who may be doing a patch. But the way our financial system would have it is that when he's doing a feature, well, that's our DT&E. And if he's doing a patch, that's O&M. And so then it becomes on us, like it almost became an argument of like, which color am I supposed to be using for which thing? And how am I supposed to try and figure out how much money I have for each of those if I'm in an agile construct to where I need to be adaptable, regardless of what the prioritizations are or what's coming down for the software builds that I have. So one of the things that we also helped Pathfind is what we call Budget Authority 08 or BA08. And what that does for us is have a single appropriation, a single color, if you will, for software. We were one of 9 programs that started in FY21 to explore this. And we have found an extreme success, at my level of us helping be able to make the appropriate trades between, should I be doing some legacy stuff, which would have been traditionally O&M dollars, versus like I can take some risk here and actually apply it to new capability in RDT&E, and I don't have that artificial delineation between RDT&E and O&M. So I actually maximize the funding that Congress appropriates me to getting capability out there faster, and also then decommissioning the legacy systems that I don't need anymore. So because in the past we were seeing, if I had asked for this much O&M, which if the FIDA, the palming cycle that we have, you try and project 5 years out what you need and like hope that you guessed it right by the time that year shows up. Now, like in the past, we had to actually give money back because it wasn't the right color for the work that I needed to get done. Now, because I am able to have all of that funding put together, and I can work with my users where their priorities are and actually apply that funding to it, it's that much helpful for me to use every dollar that the taxpayers that we're grateful that we receive for that capability that gets out to the users.
The pilot program that happened, there's so much more to talk to for that. And we're just right up on a break. So before I do that, this was approval from Congress. This was special authority from Congress that said, C2 and Space Force and these other 8 programs can try this out. And then I'm sure you have to do some sort of report back to Congress about how it's going.
Oh, no, absolutely. Because obviously they want to get the feedback themselves to see if this was worthwhile for them and whatnot. So I work very closely with DoD with the ANS folks up there to be able to provide that feedback so that they can loop that in with what the other programs are experiencing and provide that information back to Congress. It's gotten so popular, if you will, that for FY22, the list has grown of programs that want to take advantage of BA08. And so we're very excited to see how this can actually help other program managers be able to capitalize and maximize their spending power as well.
All right, Colonel, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation because I have so many more questions to ask you about that funding, because that has been the biggest challenges we've seen throughout not just the Air Force and the DoD, but across all government. But we'll take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion, Technology and Great Power Competition, sponsored by Palantir on Federal News Network.